So tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me a little bit about what you do, and let chat know what we're talking about.
Oh, hey everybody. So yeah, my name's Joel Bylas. I'm the creative director on the Dune Awakening, which is our upcoming survival game that we've been working on for a while. And yeah, I mean that's kind of it. I mean, unless we want to go into the details of my job, which is
Oh yeah.
yeah, creative direction.
Yeah, no, absolutely go into the details for it. We've got a large community of developers. So one of the things that I like to
Okay.
do is I actually run two major game jams a year. Last one had 15,000 people. This next one's probably it's already about 10,000 signed up and people that are interested for it, and it goes on in January. For so many
Nice.
many people from the industry here, a lot of them just entering the industry as well.
So yeah, I mean, like, so what I do as a creative director essentially, and especially because we're working with Dune and in the past worked with games like Conan, a lot of what I do is I translate this IP from like a story movie into and try to bring the fantasy of that into a game. And so a lot of my work is kind of working with the team to figure out what are key player fantasies, and then sort of trying to realize those in the video game, right? And allowing people to play them. Yeah. So sort of my day to day, I'll meet with the directors. There are multiple directors on this project. It's gotten larger over time. It wasn't this big when it started, but it's grown and grown. So we have world directors, art directors, audio directors. Another game director who handles things like combat, and we all work together. We have conversations about what we're trying to achieve, and then the idea is to spread the message downward. So I set up, for example, a series of game principles, design principles for the project that we need to follow, and then we sort of checklist through those things in our head as we're working on design elements. And yeah, and then my job is also reviewing and approving and sort of trying to create with the team and the directors in particular a mental model of what the vision for the game is going to be so that everybody can kind of work towards the same goal.
Yeah, basically trying to keep towards the source of truth that is that,
Right.
that thing in the beginning. So one of the things I always tell chat to do, especially when they're first starting out, is building a game design document. Can you guys describe, or can you describe your guys' process with working with this kind of a thing? Like, do you have a major document? How living is this document? How much do you guys change it or modify as you go forward?
Yeah, so we go through iterations. We have Confluence, which is
Oh,
Atlassian software's
yeah.
kind of
Yeah, I bet you have
we
Jira
we
too.
yeah, we have Jira. We've had wikis in the
Oh.
past, right? So we've had internal wikis. We've done it with Confluence. We've actually done like the old school hardcore Word document that's like 100 pages long, explaining facets as well. But on June we use Confluence, and like on there every sort of I mean it's huge, right? And we actually have a person who works whose job it is to keep it organized and
Yep.
sort of keep the relevant information up to date for people to see. And she's great. Hi, Jill. And yeah, so the idea is that from on Confluence we sort of document everything, and then it's sort of we actually have a design process we call CAB, which is kind of about like how the stages of design go from conception through to an implementation. And I really wish the game director was here because it's his design process. But it sort of starts with a brief from a director, and then it
Mhm.
goes back to the team, and they create like a large. So the brief might just be one page, and it'll be like this is kind of the vision for the feature, and these are the things that we think you need to be concerned about. So a series of bullet points, very simple one page kind of document. And then that goes to the team, the designer who's in charge of it. And then their job is to expand upon that, come back with details, go and talk to all of the leads of the different departments that they're involved with. So, if it requires animation, you need to go talk to the animation leads, audio, and then come back with a presentation of like, okay, this is what we think the feature looks like in the game. And then that goes through rounds of feedback. And then we come to like a conclusion. Okay, this is what, say, mining in Dune Awakening is going to be.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that makes sense. So, give me a little bit of your background with Dune as an IP. I've been watching, like, I love Dune. I love it.
Okay.
I've got a Baron action figure around here somewhere from like the original, like
Nice.
floating gross corpse guy. Like I love Dune, love it super a whole lot. So, tell me all about it. Tell me about how you feel about Dune, your history with
Sure.
the IP, everything.
Yeah. So I sort of Dune was something that I tried to read when I was like 12. I think my dad had like this crusty old 1960 print of the book on his shelf. And I remember like I used to sort of go through my dad's bookshelf and try to read. And I kind of remember reading it and it was a bit difficult for me. I remember thinking it was quite complex and I wasn't getting half of what was going on. And I remember putting it down but then I fell in love with the 1992 original Dune game. The music in that game is fantastic, right? And I'm not talking about Dune 2, the RTS. I'm talking about Dune 1. The music in that game is phenomenal, and I remember it just really brought me into the world, and it made me very interested. And then I think when I was a bit older, I went back, read the book. By then, I'd sort of played both of the Dune games that came out in '92. Yes, and I would have been 12. So yeah, just putting my age on the table, and then yeah, so I've sort of always been aware and known about Dune as an IP, and I'd read the first three books, but I hadn't really thought too much about it, apart from that I liked it, and I'd seen the '84 movie, of course, but then a few years ago, we actually made a game called Conan Unconquered with a company called Petroglyph, and Petroglyph are the old Westwood guys who made Dune 2 the RTS. And when we were working with them, they mentioned to us that, there might be a new set of movies coming out, or there might be a new Dune movie coming out. And our CEO, who is also a huge Dune fan, he went and started asking around, like, hey,
it's
maybe,
like,
and he got in, and he got in contact with Legendary, and we just, Conan Exiles was doing pretty well at that point, and it was like, oh yeah, like we need a new project, and we don't want to plagiarize our own project of like, we don't want to do Conan 2 straight away, because Conan Exiles has lots of life left in it, right? So it was, and so he went and he was like, yeah, I think, and then he talked to them, and yeah, Legendary were really open to working with us on Dune, and then it just sort of became, okay, like this is the next project. And then, so when I got to come back onto it, I of course did my normal thing, which is I just go like deep dive right into the lore as far as I can go. So I went and read everything that I could, and I really like fell back in love with it in a way, like, because of course I hadn't thought about it for quite a while. And then I dug right in, and I realized, I would say at my age, I was like, oh, Herbert was so much smarter than I gave him credit for the first time I read it. Or maybe I've just grown a little smarter. And there's so much there. There's so much depth. And he does such a great job of just hinting at things, but letting our imaginations fill in the gaps. And so, of course, for a video game, like for making a game, there it's like, oh, okay, there's a lot of gaps to fill in. And that's actually kind of the fun part of the job, right? So, yeah.
I think the cool thing for me is like my dad's cinematics, right? So he was cinematic director for Blizzard for a long time, and so he used to show us movies all the time. So my first introduction to Dune was actually a David Lynch film, and I loved that. It was like, Lynch is wild. So then after that, I ended up getting to the books. I ended up getting to the rest of it. And I was like, this is freaking cool. Like, it's such a weird, it's like totally weird universe, like something that you wouldn't expect. It's super interesting, very cool. And when I found out that Dune Awakening was becoming a thing, I was like, I have to know more about this. So I've been very, very excited for this game for, I don't know, it's got to be like 6 months since I found out. Something like, it's like half a year at this point. Yeah. So I've been into it. I was like, wait a minute, that's real? Hell yeah. So tell me a little. Sorry, go for it.
No, I was just gonna say, and the Lynch movie. What the thing I love about it, and Villeneuve's movies are great, but the Lynch movie had that weird edge to it that I think the newer movies don't quite have as much. So I think like people who haven't seen the old movie, it's worth going to watch just to get the feel of how weird some stuff is.
Yeah. Lynch's stuff is on its own. It's very weird. So if you guys have never seen the original Dune or seen Twin Peaks or like anything by David Lynch before, go watch it, because even his YouTube is weird. Like, dude makes weird stuff. It's awesome, and I love those types of creators, because you will never get that experience from anybody else in the industry anywhere. Like they have a unique vision that is, well, it's weird. It's weird and cool,
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about the game. Like, I am itching to know more about Dune Awakening, because I've watched it. I've wondered about the gameplay. I've wondered about like all the information about the game that we can, like anything that I could find, and I don't know anything about the progression. I don't know anything about like persistence in the world or anything like that. I know there's base building. I know there's going around the desert, and I know you're going to die to a worm. Like, eventually this will happen.
Yeah, the beta has a great Discord channel called Worm Survivor Support Group, which I really appreciate, because then everyone shares their stories of being eaten by the worm. But yeah, so I mean, the game is like, how do I put this? We say open world survival MMO or open world multiplayer survival. Like, it's kind of the description is crafted in a way that causes some ambiguity with people. I understand that, because it's sort of trying to hybridize. Like, let me say that the start of the project, it was just something along the lines of, hey, survival games aren't known for their engaging end games. You kind of like, survival games have this great loop of like obstacle overcome, obstacle overcome, obstacle overcome, obstacle overcome, and in doing so, I mean, RPGs generally have that loop, but in survival games, it's done through crafting and learning more about the world and learning more how to understand the hazards in the world. And so we were like discussing how does this in a game like Dune, and we just made Conan, which is a survival game, and we were like, how does a game like Dune tie into a survival loop, and then how does that become sort of an epic end game? And we talked about the political intrigue of the Dune universe, and we talked about, okay, so you start in the desert and you build your way up towards this kind of, you know, house level or faction level conflict. And so that was kind of where the whole sort of process began, and how we ended up being kind of this survival MMO hybrid. So the game is it starts out like a traditional survival game, I would say. It has a you know, an opening sequence which is about 10, 15 minutes long, that sort of takes place in single player and gives you a grounding in the basics of the world. And then we dump you into this area of the world called Haga Basin. And Haga Basin is this it's behind the shield wall, so it's not the most dangerous part of Arrakis, but it's still pretty freaking dangerous because it's Arrakis. So,
Yeah.
you know, you've got to deal with sun, you've got to deal with sandworms, you're scrabbling for water, you don't really have any resources, and you don't really know anyone because the ship that crashed and left you here on Arrakis was a prison ship on its way to a slave camp on the planet. So you don't really have much, and you don't have allies or friends. You do meet a guy pretty early, but it's and then you just kind of have to make your way in the world. Like with all good survival games, it's sort of about overcoming those hazards and getting stronger. But then in June, something happens, and you start to encounter civilization more, and you start to interact with factions, and you start to, there's this conflict between Atreides and Harkonnen. I don't know if you know anything about the alt history of the game, but we can talk about that in a bit.
Oh,
But
I'm interested in that. Yeah, we'll get to it
yeah,
though.
yeah, and so like the progression, let's say the journey, I would say, of the player, rather than sort of talking about dry progression, it's just you start as this abandoned person in the desert of Arrakis, which really kills, like, you know, 99 out of 100 people would die there, and because you're, you know, the player, it's up to you to figure this out. You probably will die a few times, of course, but you figure it out and you learn the ways of the desert, you know, through your actions, and then you become stronger, and you learn to craft more specific survival devices, and then eventually you start coming into contact with the Imperium, and you start realizing there's more going on, and then hopefully you start also teaming up and working with other players if you haven't been doing that from the beginning, and then, you know, hopefully you become part of this political intrigue towards the end.
Do you think it is possible? Because I know people are going to ask about this. Do you think it's possible to play a game like this solo and kind of get into all of the things that you can, but do it as a nomad, as a singular player, as somebody that's kind of like a thorn in other people's sides?
Yeah, a lot of people do play that way, like especially in the beta. You know, we track people and see how they play. There are big guilds, and there are people who play alone. The way that the people who play alone can influence things is they can sell things on the exchange, which is kind of like an auction house system, right? And they can join factions. They just, if they want to participate in the political system, the Landsrad, you can just create a guild of one, and then still pledge yourself to one of the houses, and then still participate in the Landsrad in that way. So you can still do it as a solo person, and your
That's cool.
influence will be less than like a full guild, because a full guild pumping out stuff together is obviously going to have, you know, a force multiplier in the game. But in general, yeah, of course you can. Like, you can still be a part of everything.
So I'm interested in like server persistence, right? So let's say this is
Yep.
taking on place. Is it all one giant server? Are these a bunch of clustered servers? Is it like a match round? Like, how does this function?
Let me tell you a tech story, because I think this is fun. We started out trying to make a singular world with server meshing, which I know you're probably particularly interested in. I know you've talked to the Ashes of Creation guys,
Oh
and I
yeah,
know that and Star Citizen, right? They've been working on this server meshing tech, and we began with a similar idea. I don't know if you've heard of Atlas,
yeah.
the game, but yeah. So we were looking at, like, okay, a map like that, but stitched together with all the servers like talking to each other and allowing people to flawlessly cross servers. And it was more that at some point in development we realized that this was just too much content to make to create an engaging world for the players. So we ended up keeping that concept. So we have this place called the Deep Desert, which is a map that has server meshing. It has 9 meshed servers working together to create a very large space, and that's beyond the shield wall. It's the most dangerous part of the world. It's fully PvP enabled, which again we can talk about. Um, and it's kind of out there where the Coriolis storms happen, and the really big spice blows happen. And then we have other maps that are persistent 40-person instance, like, sorry, not instance, but they're survival maps, and we have multiple versions of those maps. So in a way, instances, but not exactly an instancing system. And those all connect to the same social hubs and the same deep desert. So in what we call a world, there might be, let's say, 20 of the Hager Basin South map, where you can have persistent buildings. You can, everything is as you'd expect in a normal survival game, persistent everything. Then you can go to the deep desert. The deep desert itself is also persistent as a server mesh setup, but every week the giant Coriolis storm happens, and when it occurs, it wipes out everything that's been built. It changes the landscape. So every week that deep desert actually changes. The map itself changes. It's not the same map every week. So
Okay.
the sandstorm alters the landscape technically, and everything changes out there. And then the social hubs themselves are also these like big, they're big social instances. So people can go there once they hit a cap, they'll instance to a new version of the social hub. But there's no persistence in the sense of like building in the social hubs.
Yeah. So then in the outside of that area, everything stays the same. Nothing gets wiped out every week. That's freaking awesome. I think that's actually really cool. Because like I don't think I've seen a game do that either, where it's like one section of the world resets. That's really interesting.
Yeah, we like, Rust has this fantastic server reset mechanic, and it drives this race between people.
Yeah.
And I like that, but I wanted to. We were talking about how we could also like, what is the Dune version of this? And the Coriolis storms are a fantastic, mechanic in and of
Great
themselves.
Yeah.
But also just that like, yeah, people can sort of protect their stuff and have their persistent home, but then they can choose what they want to gamble by going out into the deep desert, right? You can sort of make choices about, well, what do I want to bring with me? What do I want to do out there? And of course, we put very tempting things out there for people, naturally.
How hard is it to extract items back out of that area, that deep desert area? Is it just a transport? Is it I have to build a thing? Is it a timer? Is it like I would think like the Dark Zone in Division?
Yeah.
If you play that,
Yeah,
how does this go? Yeah.
Yeah, no, to get the resources out, you actually have to travel with them. So it's logistics, right? And the deep desert is huge. It's 81 square kilometers, right? So it's more
big.
than that. I'm crazy. It's not 81 square kilometers. It's 24 by 24, whatever. It's huge. And so the logistics and travel time play a part, right? And we've actually designed it with that in mind. So there's a little safe section at the bottom, which, if you remember your Dune story, the shield wall, which is the mountain range which protects the rest of Arrakis from the horrible sandstorms, or protects the northern part of the hemisphere. So that shield wall is it's a PvE strip, so people can enter the area without getting just destroyed by anyone waiting to ambush them. But then you can go north into the desert, and the further north you go, the higher the percentage of spice blows and things that you'll encounter that are actually worth a lot of value to you. So the idea from our end is that I'm trying to, with this end game, and honestly, I can't say it's working yet, right? Because the beta is limited, and it's a population percentage. Like there's a question of but the idea is to create this thing we call the Coriolis race, and that is every week. And part of this was based on looking at also player activity on multiplayer games, because there's this obviously a surge, right? People sort of ramp up towards the weekend. They play a lot on the weekends, and then it sort of backs off a little bit down towards Tuesday, Wednesday nights, and then it starts to go up again. And this is a pattern I've observed from working on multiple MMOs and Conan Exile's survival game. So I sort of see the patterns in play, and then the idea is like, so on a Tuesday night the Coriolis storm happens, and that resets the map, and then on a Wednesday, Thursday, guilds send out their scouts, and scouts have the system called the cartography system in the game, which means you can scan areas of the map. It reveals like a fog of war, but you can actually print your own maps and then share them with people in your guild, and the people in your guild can just apply them, and then suddenly they'll have all the information. So the idea is to create this economy of like map sharing, right? And
that's cool, dude. That's
that's
a super compelling gameplay loop for me. Like that sounds really awesome, especially because there's a weekly reset. So now you have I've seen that done in like kind of other games where you have these types of systems that seem limited because it's like, wow, it's really cool up until it's worthless, and then like it doesn't matter. But if you're doing a weekly reset, there's always going to be a market for that. And that means that gameplay style, if you want to go be a cartographer, you can. And that's cool.
Yes, exactly.
That's very
so. And the idea is you can put those maps on the exchange for other players to buy, and how reliable you are as a map maker. Like, because the maps have multiple layers of information, right? There's just the maps with the fog of war cleared. That's one thing that comes from the survey system. But then there's also, if you go around and use the scanner, which is a manual kind of scanning of the environment, you actually mark off where resources are on the map as well. So maps will have value inherently. Some will be more valuable because they'll have more resources marked. Some won't have all the resources marked. Like someone will just do a basic, I've scanned all the regions in the deep desert, and that it takes hours. It's not an activity that takes no time, right? Because you have to go and scan all these sectors, and it's it's quite a large space to be doing that in. So yeah, and then that's sort of how I imagine like or how I hope that the loot plays out on, let's say, a Wednesday and a Thursday when there's lower activity. You have your scouts, and there's a little bit of PvP out there, but it's not like the major event. But then the scouts are marking areas where they're seeing spice blows, where they're seeing high tier resources, where they're seeing uncovered dungeons that weren't there the week before, right? Where they're seeing shipwrecks that have been uncovered by the shifting sands. And then they're going back to their guilds and saying, okay, this is what's out there, right? And then the guilds are planning logistics. So then I expect, like, let's say Thursday, Friday, guilds get out there, they start building bases on the islands that are closest to the things that they want, because let's say we call the rock islands out amongst the sea of sand in a way. So they go out and they're building their bases. They're trying to claim prime spots. There may be some fighting going on over those spots. And then as the cycle ramps up for the weekend, then suddenly you have a lot more activity out there in the deep desert and a lot more going on. And that's kind of, and the thing that drives this race on the other side of it is we have this system called the Landsrad, and the Landsrad are asking people to do specific things each week to earn votes. And those votes then are used to set a server rule for the week. And that means that, tradies in Harkonnen will be competing for the right to set a server rule that applies to the entire world across all groups. So
can I choose a faction there? Like, can you choose to go with Harkonnen?
Yeah, you choose. Yeah. Sorry, as you play the game, you can choose
awesome.
one of those two factions. And
okay.
I also want to have a third faction. I'm not talking about it yet because I'm not sure it'll happen for launch. It might happen just after launch, but there's a planned third faction as well.
So when we talk about like a server rule, like what does that mean? Like what would be an example of a server rule in this case?
Sure. One of them can be that for your faction for the rest of the week, so for the week of the Landsrad, until the next Landsrad voting event, everybody on your faction on all servers in that world has 25% reduced crafting costs. Or
that's huge.
Yes, it's very big, especially if you're or like, to give an example that PvP players might want to fight over, it means that from now on, because the deep desert does not have full loot drop, but for a 1 week after if people voted in, then there can be a decree that says the right of salvage in the deep desert is that everybody can loot everything from everybody.
So this is the hardcore PvP time for that. That's kind of wild. Yeah, I'm actually interested. What are the loot rules then? In that case, if it's not full loot PvP all the time, what are the loot rules normally?
The loot rules right now are in PvE, obviously. So when you die, you drop resources, Solari, which is the currency. You take some durability damage to your gear. If you're in the PvP zone, people can loot those things. In the PvE zone, they can't, obviously. Pick up your stuff. And then, so that's kind of it. It's a percentage of resources. It's Solari. So it's basically like, if you go to the deep desert to harvest spice and you get killed in PvP, you will drop your spice. Right? You can't bring your spice out. But that's kind of it. That's what we're doing. We're quite soft on the. We didn't like full loot PvP by default. We feel is kind of, it attracts a certain type of like very hardcore.
I played EVE for 15 years, man. Like, I'm used to it.
One of our designers is an ex-EVE economy designer, so. Yeah.
But they were like, nullsec, put nullsec in it.
Well, that's one of the thoughts of what the deep desert kind of is like, right? A little bit of nullsec there, a little bit of taste.
Cool. I love that though. I think that's actually quite cool, and I think these ideas of having the political intrigue driving gameplay like that is really compelling. And in fact, I didn't even realize that would be part of this. Like that wasn't even on my radar, so that's quite cool. The size of space, I believe you said it was 24 by 24 kilometers.
Yeah.
So you're 570. It's 576 kilometers squared, if I did my math right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a wild amount of space. Like
It's
that is
big, but
that's
you have
enormous.
vehicles, so it's not.
Yeah.
It's like one of the one of the things that like we've talked about from the beginning as well is just like what I call scales of traversal. Like
Hmm.
there's a rock island in the middle of desert, and you're exploring that rock island on foot, and then you jump on like a sand bike to cross to the next rock island, and that that's a journey across the sand with everything that entails sandworms and vibration and the fear, because the sandworm is a very real threat in the game. It's one of the, we could talk about that, but like making sure that people feel that threat from the moment they start playing to the moment they quit is like 100% the goal. The sandworm should not become less scary. It should just become more situationally scary. And so yeah, so it's first by foot, then it's by vehicle, and then it's by flying. And I mean, I know you first of all worked on WoW, but I also know you know WoW very well. The thing about flying mounts in these kind of games is that they tend to change the way people look at games.
Yeah.
They because the scale of traversal alters, and everything changes. So once you get an ornithopter in the game and you can fly around in an ornithopter, obviously the scales of traversal change. So the deep desert is really designed at the stage where people have the ability to traverse by flying. So even though it's this gigantic space, you can still get around it using ornithopters. So it's not the end of the world, but it's still, yeah, it's still a big place. It takes maybe 15 minutes to cross with an ornithopter. And most of that
That's
is empty
massive.
sand.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely wild. One of the things I was thinking of, people were talking in chat, like, can you doctor maps and things like that? Can you forge them to make it look like there's a resource there? And even if that's not in the game, I can think of a scenario like this, right? I produce a map. I'm just a average trader. I'm the guy that's out there on his own, being a nomad. I sell a map, but I'm actually part of this other faction, and I let them know that I sold you the map where they're going to be at this location at this time getting these resources, and they set up an ambush for you. So there's a lot of different ways you can use intelligence in situations like this to gain a PvP advantage or an economic advantage because you've baited them into a location. You know exactly where they're going to be.
Yeah, 100%. So no, there's not the custom changes to the map. We didn't add that yet. It was discussed. It's just sort of been out of scope for launch. But yes, what you're talking about, 100%. You can
That's
sort
the
of
first
sell
thing I
people
wanted to do.
maps. Yeah,
It's like,
yeah, you
oh,
can sell people maps with a thing revealed that like is really cool. Like here's that eco lab that has this this specific rare chance of a drop, and people are like, oh, okay, that's the place we're going to go to, and of course you just have your entire guild waiting there for it. So
so one of the other things about that too is what happens when that is mined out for the week. Can that happen? Is it just done? Like
yeah,
what occurs there? Is it first come first serve for those?
yeah, so it's we have a no, well, it's not first come first serve. There is a lock that I think comes down after a few days. Um, so the doors to the eco labs will be closed off and then unlocked at a certain point. At least that's the plan. I don't know if it's actually in the beta right now, so the beta players don't shoot me if it's not there yet. But the idea is that yes, we can so people can find these spots first before they become unlocked, and so you can have a little bit of competition over those areas.
That's cool.
The idea is inside, like what we have is like schematics that are like we have so in terms of progression system, I'm just trying to think, we haven't really talked about it. Crafting system, right? There's like, oh, I level up, I get crafting points, I get skill points, I spend skill points on my character progression up until I need to go find trainers in the world to train me in more advanced techniques. The crafting that's not a tree exactly, it's a menu. The crafting menu, you have both regular schematics, and then you have schematics that require Imperial permits because the Imperium controls and suppresses technology to a certain extent. They don't want everybody to have access to everything, particularly the peons, as they call them. So you find these schematics, these unique schematics that you can craft, but you can only craft them once, and then the schematic is absorbed. So you need to go and find more versions of that schematic. So for a week, there might be an ecology lab that has, let's say, a very special las gun, right? That does a particular type of, I don't know, has a very short cooldown, so it's quite a good weapon. Lots of people want it, and it respawns every hour for that week. A schematic of that. So across the week, you can get, I don't know, 50 copies of that schematic, and then that dungeon goes away when the Coriolis storm happens, and it doesn't show up again for another 3 months. So you're the only people on that server who can craft that unique schematic, and you have 50 copies of it for the next 3 months. So there's only 50 examples of that item that might exist on the server for the next 3 months, right? Until someone else gets it, or until randomization plays its part and that map comes up again. And maybe that map comes up next week and it was just random chance. But you might also be able to corner the market, and then you can decide whether you want to keep that for your guild, give you an advantage. You have a very good las gun that has a very short cooldown,
Yeah.
or you start selling them on the exchange to other people. So that's kind of how that works.
In terms of that, of getting like very high value loot and things like this, what tools do players have in order to protect that inside of their bases? And what kind of counterplay do I have, say, if I wanted to be a spy and I wanted to go steal something from a certain faction? I go and join them, I befriend everybody, I infiltrate their organization and steal things out. And what can I do as an organization runner to stop them from doing such a thing?
There's not a lot you can do as an organization runner. I think that we kind of want this kind of gameplay to a certain extent from a just a lore Dune perspective. We will like the idea of players engaging in political intrigue. Of course, you have permission systems, so you can obviously set chests that only if we're having a guild and I'm giving you access to our gigantic base, but you're a newcomer, I don't really trust you. I only give you a basic level of permission, access to chests and things that are general, rather than giving you access to the highest tier items and so forth. Yeah, so I think that's kind of the way that both as a spy you can sneak in, do your thing, and then you have to try and social engineer your way to the top. Or on the other side of it, as a guild leader, if you're paranoid, you just lock people out, you keep access tight, and you control things, right? So yeah, that's kind of where it is.
That's awesome. I really like that. Yeah, now, so we've got an ad break coming in about 1 minute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop it now. And we're actually going to watch, you guys have a video out for Dune Awakening Survive Arrakis trailer. So I'm just going to throw that up during the ad break, and then we'll be back to it right afterwards.
Arrakis is a test. Few survive it. Arrakis is a test. Few survive it. But the humans that do awaken.
So yeah, let's see. I think we got to get into the nitty gritty where I know people are going to be nervous about this.
Okay.
What is the monetization model? Do you guys actually have one that you've made public, one that you're willing to talk about?
And we
It's the
haven't
scary
talked
one.
about it.
Yeah.
We haven't really talked about it yet. And it's I'm not supposed to talk about it too much yet because it's sort of not been completely ironed out, to be honest. I know that we're going to have a one-time fee for the launch game. I know we're not going to have a subscription. There'll probably be some sort of monetization in the game, but I think there'll be more details to come. To be honest, I'm just not allowed to say much yet.
Totally understood. I think the biggest thing that everyone's always going to be concerned about is it pay to win or not? Is really all that it comes down to.
Absolutely not. We like even Conan Exiles, right? It was a game we had a battle pass and stuff, but it was all cosmetics. We didn't, So yeah, we won't be doing pay to win. It's not.
Good.
Let's say it's not my philosophy as a game developer either.
Yeah,
So,
no, that's good. I think that's always going to be the biggest concern, especially with any gaming community, is your game pay to win? This looks cool, but it would be ruined based on a pay to win anything. So that's really good to hear. I was
100%.
worried about that too. I'm always worried about that.
Oh yeah, okay. No,
Yeah.
I mean, it's yeah. I don't know. I don't think people here are in favor of that kind of monetization. Like people who work here, like a lot of people are gamers, right? Like not everybody. There's business people in the company too, but I think they tend to listen to us. Like,
Yeah, that's
and we
good.
say
Not every
this is not a
studio
good
does.
idea. Right? Like, yeah. It's like it's not a good idea, and I don't know. Like even on Conan Exiles, when I was originally like when we were working on that project, and we were figuring out post launch, people were like, "Oh, we need to sell things to people for money." I was like, "Oh, like let's just make these nice cosmetic DLCs about cultures in the Conan universe." And it's like we give them a new building set, we give them new armors and things like that, and people loved it. And it was like, yeah, I can't remember how much they cost. Maybe it was $10, but you got like 50 items for that, and it was yeah, I don't know. So stuff like that, I can imagine.
Cosmetic stuff. That's cool.
Yeah.
No, I dig that. And I think that'll resonate with people a lot. I think the biggest thing that games have to prove now is, what is your business model? Then I'll feel if I can get attached to this or not. And the idea of going in not pay to win at all that's really compelling. And I think it's going to garner a lot of attention, especially when you have so many PvP elements. I think the PvP elements really drives home that pay to win would be like a really big negative for that. So good. That's awesome. I'm really excited for that.
Yep.
One of the things we were talking a minute ago about, like getting in and infiltrating another person's base, infiltrating their organization, things like that, being part of valid gameplay for that, is there an opportunity to siege, say, another person's base in some way? Because I know that's not inside of the large big PvP area of the desert. It's kind of outside of that. So is there base sieges in any way? Can I go and raid a person's base? Is that a thing if we're not part of the same organization?
So bases have shields. As long as you keep them fueled up, people can't really attack your base. But anyone who knows the law knows that occasionally a sandstorm will create a static size, Shire size static field, which will take down a shield, which is a large part of the plot of both the book and the movie. And so in the deep desert, if you have a base, there are times when a sandstorm passing over may cause your base shield to go down for a period of time. In that window, people can attack your base.
That's
it's a very brief period, and it's kind of randomized. We are keeping an eye on things like, the beta is ongoing, and we're sort of keeping an eye on how things are going. And I'm sort of listening to people, both sides of the story here, where people are complaining about being raided, or people are complaining about losing things, or people are complaining because it's too random and they want to be able to. But so we'll probably do things like make sure that people are protected during, like if it's a European server, you probably won't have sandstorms that do that during the times when most people are asleep, or when they're not available to play. So maybe only during prime time hours and things like that. But that's kind of the mechanics. So there is a possibility. It's not highly encouraged in the game, I would say. I think kicking down other people's sandcastles is a really good way to make community quite toxic. I've seen that in Conan Exiles as well. A lot of the raids where people were just smashing other people's bases while they were asleep in a different time zone it didn't create a good culture. And I personally think it's like people like to PvP. If people PvP fairly, if they're both into it and they both want it, it's a good thing. If one side doesn't want it and the other side's just attacking them egregiously, it never feels great for the people being attacked, right? So the game isn't encouraging explicit base raiding most of the way through it, but there is opportunity windows in the deep desert, and the deep desert is a place where everything gets wiped every week anyway. So hopefully people feel that, like, well, okay, yeah, I built this base here for logistics and someone attacked it, during the window that was available, and they feel like that's an okay moment, and that's quite okay. It's acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like if it's in the deep desert, it's the same thing we used to say in Eve, is when you undock, that's you saying, I'm ready to PvP. Whether you're in high security space or low security space or null sec, it doesn't matter. You've undocked. I'm PvP enabled now, right? If you're in the deep desert, I could feel that would be the same thing. It was like, this is where I go to take risks, right? So
absolutely, and that's part of it, right? Dipping your toe in that, because I think PvP makes games more exciting, right? Like I love the threat of being attacked, and I love playing a game and feeling that I got to keep an eye out. It makes you more alert as you play, but it's just there are griefers as well, right? So we got to be careful.
Yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit from all the PvP stuff, because that sounds quite compelling and cool. It seems like there's a really deep end game for that. What about the PvE players? What about Like, are there dungeons that I can go into? I know you talked a little bit about an eco lab that you can go into. What kind of opportunities are there for players like that?
Yeah, so I mean, the game is like a largely a PvE experience, at least for the first, I want to say, 80 hours as you're exploring. There are small PvP zones within the first map that players play in. So before you get your first ornithopter, you might go to a shipwreck. Some of the shipwrecks have PvP innately because we basically call it the right of salvage. We use the Canley system from the lore, so the idea that people can engage on their own terms. So some spaces are marked for Canley. That is open PvP. So if you go into a particular shipwreck, you can be attacked by other people and fight over what's in that shipwreck. But in general, otherwise, the entire map is a PvE experience. We have, obviously, I'd say we have slightly more quests / contracts than your average survival game does. We have a journey system, which people follow. We have a main story, which follows your character. It's kind of like, it's very, I think, MMO in the sense that it's not kind of the main point, but you kind of drop in and out of it occasionally and do things for an hour or two and then go back to the main, what you were doing before. So it's not like, we're not trying to make The Last of Us or anything like that, but there is a main story that you follow. That really is about your character and their purpose on Arrakis and kind of following some of the threads that we dangle out there right at the start of the game. And then, and then of course we have things like, so we have shipwrecks and we have abandoned Imperial testing stations. And these are kind of the two locations that I think PvE will kind of love. Shipwrecks are pretty straightforward. They're crashed ships or shipwrecks that have been, uncovered by the sands. They're usually a bit tighter in terms of their spacing, and you explore them, and there's resources inside that you can't get from anywhere else because they've fallen from off-world. And then you have these places called Desert Imperial testing stations, and inside the testing stations, it's kind of like in Dune lore. About 10,000 years ago, they closed off these tests. They sealed them off. And then during the time when Kynes was planetologist, some of the Fremen and Kynes were kind of opening some of them up and using them for experiments and taking some of the equipment that was there. But when Duke Leto comes to Arrakis, he's asking for them because he thinks there's equipment locked inside. And so as players, they're a little bit like vaults from Fallout. They're not like traditional MMO dungeons, but the idea is that you go into these spaces and sometimes they've been taken over by a bandit. And what's happened inside? Oh, like the plant life here has gone wild because the water trap has been running for 10,000 years just accumulating water. So there's lots more moisture in this place than there is any other place, right? So it's kind of like, oh, this place is weird. It's full of green. And that's strange, right? And what kind of experiments were they doing in here? Oh, this one, they were drilling to try and find water down below. And so this one feels like a geological testing station. And this one's been taken over by slavers. So it feels completely different. So they all have kind of a theme. And they should feel somewhat different from each other, and they all tell like a little story of Arrakis. And it's different to the experience that you get in the outside world, which is kind of the main point. It's a bit of an experience break from the desert.
Yeah, the other cool thing about that is because you guys have set that up in kind of a modular way, you can add other scenarios and add different variants and versions of these as you go forward. So yeah, as the game hooks on, you have a lot of wiggle room to play with that, actually, like a huge amount. That'd be very, very cool to see. Yeah, I'm into that. Yep. Really into that.
Yeah, it's also just like, I like the idea that we have these, I don't know, like it's just the idea that there's like 200 plus of these things on the planet according to the lore. And yeah, nobody's been in there for a while. Like what and I always think about like what were they saying they were doing and what were they actually doing? And if you go back like a long way in Dune lore, there's things like AI being forbidden. It's like, did they steal an AI and bring it to the planet and put it in one of these labs? And have they been researching it beneath the earth? And then they locked it away for 10,000 years? Like, we have these ideas we can experiment with,
And you can really expand on the lore and do some things that are quite cool with that. I think that's actually awesome as hell. Now, very excited for this. Okay, what about professions? So you said that there's cartography for that. Are these like professions like a traditional MMO where you gain skill ranks with them, you gain levels with it, you have to like research patterns? Like, how does this function?
It's more like, so we call them archetypes internally. It's more like they're both combat and sort of, so they're skill trees, right? So it's like, let's say you take the Bene Gesserit route. You in character creation, you get asked by, spoiler alert, but I guess it's been up on YouTube for a while. You get asked by the Reverend Mother who sends you to Arrakis. She asks you, you had a mentor in your youth. Who trained you. And then you can choose between like a Bene Gesserit, a Swordmaster, a Trooper, or a Mentat, right? Which are sort of very specific Dune kind of classes. And you choose one of those. Let's say you say Bene Gesserit, and then you start out with a talent from the Bene Gesserit, which means that you can actually use the voice to call people.
I was like,
run to you, right?
You can use the voice, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
so that's
cool.
that's like so that's the first Bene Gesserit ability, and you're just like kind of and people are like, oh, men can't be Bene Gesserit by the law, and I'm like, you're not really a Bene Gesserit. You just had a Bene Gesserit mentor who taught you a few things, and we have Paul as an example of a male who was actually trained by Bene Gesserit, and then later on Jessica trained Farad'n as well in the law. So I'm covering my bases there, but
good.
You learn a few things, and then as you play the game, like you get ability points when you level up. You can spend them in abilities. Some of the abilities are passives, some of them are actives, and some of them are techniques. Techniques have to be equipped as well. Techniques are things like if you have this particular technique equipped, you'll do like 30% more damage on a headshot, right? So it's not a passive that runs all the time. You actually have to choose it because you want to set up a specific build. And then we have 3 active abilities, and active abilities really are you push a button to make something happen in the world. For example, you use the voice, or we have one called Shigawire Claw, which is like a trooper ability, which lets you fire off a Shigawire, which is like a very thin, super strong thread, and it lets you pull yourself. So like almost like a grappling hook, but a grappling hook with momentum attached, right? So you learn these abilities and these passives through these skill trees. And the thing is, we didn't want to restrict people, so you can go and meet trainers in the world who will train you in these different trees. So you start out with the one that you chose in character creation, but then you have to go find other trainers, and then they will teach you their particular set of skills. And then in addition to that, you can also go and learn advanced training. So you have, I think, somewhat involved quest lines now where you want to go and I want to be a better Bene Gesserit. I have to go and convince this rogue Bene Gesserit to take me on and to give me skills, and I have to help her out so that she'll help me out, right? So the game kind of tries to integrate these things together quite tightly. So that's how you progress as I want to say archetype/class in the game.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's actually really cool. One of the things chat wanted to ask about the voice, can you use the voice on players? Is that possible?
Yes, 100%. Yeah,
terrifying.
You can,
that is terrifying.
You can get like you can get some immunity to the voice through some of the other trees. You can learn certain skills that allow you to like not be triggered by the voice. So there are things as well, and you have to remember in the books, when they use the voice, they have to actually lock in on the person. So it does take some time for the voice to activate if they start using it on you, and you can break line of sight and do things like that to prevent them from being able to hit you with it. Right?
I dig that. I think that's really cool. It's like, oh, they're using it. Bury myself in sand. We're fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Eaten by a worm. Don't matter. Oh, so with that in mind for professions, I'm interested. What is the overall progression for this? Do we have levels? Are we gaining experience for killing monsters? Is it all gear based? Like, how does this function?
It's sort of, so we made a balanced decision early on. It's about 33, 33, 33, 33% gear, 33% skills and progression, and 33% player skill. That was kind of our unique angle on it. There are more stats involved, but you level up in the game. As you level up, you get basically intel points. Intel points you spend on the technology tree. You also find intel points in the world by exploring. So you can go to enemy bases and find intel they've collected and use that to unlock new technology as well. In addition to those intel points, you have ability points. Ability points you spend on training up like in those specific archetypes. The ability points are only given through levels, and you have to go and like find trainers, as I mentioned, when you want to progress further. So you can have unlocked sort of all the basic stuff, but at some point progression will be blocked until you go figure out who these trainers are and what they want you to do for them.
So with that, are there any type of classes that we can sort of see, or is that all based on, as you said, you choose your background, you get a couple of base abilities for that? Like, do I choose a class later on, kind of like maybe Final Fantasy XIV or World of Warcraft, choosing it that way? And also, if I choose that character, like if I choose that background, can I change it later if I find out that I didn't like that for whatever reason?
Yeah, you're never locked. Sorry, just to be clear, like you choose a mentor, and that gives you your starting abilities. But you can just find the trainer for like, let's say I chose Bene Gesserit in character creation, and then I find the trainer for Trooper, and I talk to him. He gives me what I would have gotten if I'd chosen that as a background.
That's cool.
from the beginning. So the base level of training. So no, you can learn everything in the game. You can learn all the classes and all their trees. It just costs you a lot of time and points. So yeah, I think it was something like you'd have to play 500 hours to unlock everything, which is, it's not the end of the world, but it's and of course you can only slot 3 things at a time. So you can have 3 techniques and 3 actives slotted. So when you have those slotted, then yeah, that kind of determines your build, right? So that's how we balance on our end.
That's really cool. There was a game I used to play a long time ago called Secret World that kind of did something like that.
We made that.
Yep. It was that was actually my favorite MMO of all time. So I 100%ed that MMO. I actually 100%ed it. I beat everything in the entire game. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about it was 2 things: is the secret side quests that were all the like crypto challenges and things like that, especially in Cairo, jumping around the tops of the buildings and doing the satellite dishes and stuff like that was quite fun. Yep. And the other one was the way that the build system worked, because you had a main hand weapon and an offhand weapon. And the way that those function is you would build a bunch of passives and a bunch of actives out of those 2 weapons to build your own unique class effectively. And I played a bunch of different stuff. Like one of the ones that I did was like Elementalist and Blood Magic, and you'd hurt yourself to do crits, which was hilarious, and you just truck damage. It was super dangerous. Healers hated you, but you did so much damage. It was hilarious. But
I was lead content designer on Secret World.
Were you actually?
And I designed the investigation missions in the game.
No
so you
way.
Probably remember them. Yeah. So, that was my magnum opus in a way. I remember I joined the project. The creative director told me, because I was coming over as lead content designer, and he told me, like, we have been doing these ARGs. How would you translate ARGs into a video game? And I was like, well, here's how I can see ways to do it. And then we just, we had full steam ahead. So we got to implement all those investigation missions, which I think you're talking about with the side missions, right?
Yeah. The one, do you remember the one that was in the sewer where you have to go and like do demonic runes on the wall?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And it changed it changed every time you'd fail it, right? So I'm sitting there. My buddy's the one killing the zombies that are coming up out of the sewer. I'm the one trying to crack all the demon runes, and I screw it up, and I'm doing it on paper with a pen. Like in real life, dude, it's like, God damn it, the whole thing, and the zombies are increasing. We ended up beating them all though. Like we ended up 100% of the game together. It was super fun. But no, that content rocked, man. Like I didn't know that you worked on that actually.
Yeah. It was a high point, right? It was so much fun. There was so much room to be creative. It was super cool. It's just a shame the game didn't like find a bigger audience, really, because it was one of my favorite projects ever. Just a great setting to work with too. Like everything is true, and man, I loved it. Yeah, I missed that game.
Yeah,
and the skill wheel you're talking about. Oh my God, I remember Martin, the lead designer, and I just sitting talking about how to handle that, right? And yeah, there's a bunch of people here who worked on it. So sometimes people say in a positive way or a negative way, they say to me, this is giving me Secret World vibes. And sometimes they mean it in the right way, and sometimes they mean it in a bad way. So it's quite funny.
Yeah, I think it was. I've actually talked about the game quite a lot. It was my favorite MMO of all time, hands down. The content was really interesting, and for those who don't know, all of the monsters in the game, every place that you went to, they were all real myths and legends from real life. So you could take any monster you found and go and look it up, and it was like tied to a real life culture or a real life legend or a real life myth, and you can go and research it and find out more information about it. The cool thing was there was an in-game browser, so you can go and use that and just do it right in game. And so it was all fully immersive in that way. It was just very awesome, and I loved that. And now I like cryptids and Mothman. It's basically what came out of that. Because it's just freaking rad. Like I got so much out of that game, and I just loved it, man.
And we had so many fake websites and all that stuff we built around the game as an infrastructure. Yeah, it was.
It's so cool.
Making me want to go load it up again.
Yeah, go check it out again. See how it's doing. I haven't played it ages. Oh man, no, that's a blast to me. Well, that means, like, to be honest with you, that gives me even more hope for this, because if you're working on this and a lot of you guys worked on that, I already know the kind of general style and direction you go with this types of stuff, and now. That's cool. I think that's really compelling for me, immensely so.
Yep. I mean, it is a very different style of game. It is. Tempt those expectations, but yeah, it's. I mean, it is a lot of the same team as well. Like who were here on Secret World, a lot of the same core people were around. So yeah.
It's one of the things that I've learned throughout my career, though, is I usually don't follow studios or titles or names of things. I follow the people that work on things that are cool. And if you guys all worked on something like that already I found to be amazing. So I wouldn't be surprised if what you produce here is really cool. And what you're talking about so far seems incredibly compelling. It's quite cool.
Thank you.
So, chat, what questions do you have? Oh yeah, no, they were actually talking about this. So the server hosting is all done on your guys' end. There's no like self-hosted servers or private servers that people can do or anything like that.
There may
Or are
be.
there? Oh,
So yeah, this is the kind of weird thing that's where we sit between MMO and survival games sometimes, right? Like where I find it's hard to describe to people. We might be able to do something where people can rent a server and they'll become part of a world. So multiple servers tied to a deep desert that is shared between all these other people who are renting servers. So you have a shared deep desert, you have shared social hubs, but the server itself is just you and your friends on that particular version of the Hagia South map. I don't know if we're going to get to that by launch. I don't know if we're going to have that ready by launch, but it's certainly an option that we're talking about and it's on the table. And yeah, that'll be the way. We won't be able to allow you to do like massive rule changes like you would if you had your own server running at home because you trip 10x the XP rate or whatever. We probably wouldn't be able to allow that because we want it to be a fair experience. But yeah, to play just with your friends and rent your own server and have that running, we're definitely talking about how we can do that. So
someone in chat wanted to know, when is open beta? When can they expect to be able to play this?
I mean, we're running betas right now, closed betas. I think the link's pinned in your chat, but the we'll run an open beta sometime when we're closer to like launching. We'll figure it out. It'll I kind of make the joke with the beta players that this is a real beta, right? So expect things to be breaking and buggy and having issues. Generally, when you want to go to an open beta, you kind of want to be. It's a bit more of a marketing beta. You're a bit more ready to show everybody everything. So we're not quite there yet. We'll see sometime early next year, hopefully.
Oh, that's awesome. That is, yeah. No, I'm excited for that. So early next year, closed beta action. Yeah, no, I'm kind of excited about that, especially because if they're already building culture in the closed beta, they're already making memes like the worm support group and everything like that. Like
we had this stupid text to speech voice that we generated. I know you like text to speech, so we had this text to speech voice which we generated and it was like an Atreides trooper who was rallying the troops, and she was like Atreides, a woo, in just the flattest tone ever, right? And so that became the call sign of the beta. So everybody in the beta, and this is a shout out to the beta people watching as well, a woo. It's just
that's pretty good.
Horrible.
I love stuff like that. It just turns into like a huge meme for a long time.
It's amazing. Man. Yeah. It's everybody says it all the time now, so it's great.
I've actually got an interesting one. So I've seen so many different mechanicals that you can use, like different types of abilities, different weapons and things like that. What types of combat are there? Is it melee combat, ranged combat, and then like I've seen so many different like machine abilities, but like what are some general strategies and ways that you can do combat in the game?
Yeah, so the game kind of relies on melee, ranged, and abilities are kind of the three tactics you have, right? And then of course in melee in Dune you have like the shields and the slow blade penetrates, and then you have like ranged weapons. So we have like specifically, I think there's 7 types of ranged weapon, and they all do different things. They all have their functionality, right? And it's like but if an enemy comes at you with a shield, like if they're shielded, it's not a Halo shield, right? You actually have to get in close and penetrate their shield with a sword blade. So not all ranged weapons are effective at all times, but then you have things that actually do manage to, like poison passes through shields slowly. Fire can heat up the air around the shield and damage people within. So there's kind of this interplay where we expect people to use ranged weapons to engage enemies without shields at a distance or just to start combat. And then we expect them to switch to melee at some point, especially when people start rushing them. And then we expect them to use abilities to break the patterns. Right, that's kind of the way that our game director talks about combat. You are continually moving in and out of combat. You are switching between ranged distances and melee distances all the time. And then, if things become overwhelming, that's when you drop in abilities and you change things up completely. So that's kind of the way it flows. Like it just depends, right? We have like the Hunter Seeker, the classic assassination tool from the books, and I like to start most of my fights by sending in the Hunter Seeker to take out just one person in the camp, and it's basically an insta-kill. It's not an insta-kill if they've got a shield on, and it's not an insta-kill if it's a player. but it works fine on NPCs. So I first take down that first guy, and then I head in to the camp, and then if depending on what I'm carrying, right, I might be using my, there's a thing called the spit dart rifle, which fires like a gas powered sniper dart essentially.
Sick.
And you can take people at long range who don't have shields. But if that, then you have rushes. Rushes generally always have shields, and the Holtzman shields are basically impenetrable. So you're just firing at them, and the darts are just pinging off them as they charge at you, and then you have to switch to a knife. Like, there's a parry and block system. It's not. I mean, I don't want anyone to get the wrong impression and think that we're Dark Souls, but you parry people to create openings, and then you slow blade attack, and it's literally this painstakingly slow attack where you hold down left mouse, and it's like a heavy attack in another game, but in our game it's like you plunge into the shield and then you slowly penetrate to take them down. And so it's kind of that. Yeah.
So what about using shields in the deep desert, though? Because as far as I know from the lore, Holtzman shield should attract the worm, right? And then all hell breaks loose at that point. Can you use those in the desert?
Yeah, you're just going to attract a worm. Like, we worms are a full AI system. I should probably mention that, right? The worms are the worms are a living entity in the world. They have territories that they roam in, and they go to where vibration happens. Yeah. So you can think of a threat system in any basic sort of MMO boss fight, right? There's a threat system. People generate threat by the amount of damage they do. Think of a threat system where it's generated by vibration on the surface. So if you and I are walking on the surface and you turn on your Holtzman shield, you are definitely generating like
You're a beacon.
100x the threat. Yeah. And they're coming for you, right? It does mean that I could probably get away if we spread out enough. But the worm will come for you first. And so it creates a threat list of enemies. It goes after vehicles. It goes after people. And yeah, they kind of, like, we have kind of what I call anti-cheat mechanics for them. So like I actually watched someone, we did a user research test not that long ago, last week. And in the user research test, the player, like, they had figured out where the line was that the worm wouldn't cross, because there's always a line around the islands, which is like they've come too close to rocky ground and they won't get you if you're on rocky ground. And they figured out where that line was, and they were kind of dancing back and forth across it just to tease the worm aggro. But we have an anti-tease mechanic. If you do that to a worm, then the worm just erupts underneath you wherever you are and eats you. So you can't tease the worm.
It's right? At that point you're just done. Yeah, you're just done.
Yep.
It's over.
Yep. So people trying to cheat the worm get caught. So, but worms are this entity, yeah, and they have a threat system, and different actions create different levels of threat. Suspensors also, because they use the Holtzman effect, also attract the worm very quickly. So you have to be really careful about how and what you're doing when you're on the open sand. And yeah, for God's sake, remember to turn your shield off if you're going to go walk out there.
And I like the idea of having to, if you're out in the open desert and you get ambushed, you have to make the decision of, like, do I activate my shield right now? Can we fight this? And if I do activate my shield, what if I activate it and run at you? Right? And that's one of those things like, well, I'm going to die anyway. Let's take the worm, right? And everyone dies to the worm now. Like, those are the types of things that I would think of as, like, in that moment where you're not going to make it, make sure they don't make it too,
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And I've done that in our PvP tests. I've been the guy running into the middle of the spice patch with the shield on, and everyone's going, "What are you doing, you idiot? The worm will come," and then the worm just eats everything.
Yep.
Harvester's gone. Everyone's mad. There's a couple of people in an ornithopter just watching, kind of being astounded that someone was that stupid. But it's fun. It's, Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, so what about the spice, right? Since everybody's going out there and just trying to get spice, what is this used for game mechanics wise?
It's used for multiple things. You use it in crafting. You use it for bribing people to see their political agendas. It's actually one of the goals in the Landsrad is actually to deliver the most spice. It is I don't want to spoil too much, but it certainly drives your character to a certain extent. Like, taking spice has an impact on you personally. Both. Let's say that, like, a part of the universe is about expanding your mind through spice and the impacts that has on people, and it's certainly thematic to the book where Paul, his visions go 10x when he reaches the planet. Certainly, as a player, when you reach the planet and start experiencing spice, things change a little for you.
I'm excited to try that.
Yeah. So those things are all
that's kind of interesting, actually, because you start off as just a normal person, like before any of this, right? You're just kind of a normal
Yeah,
person
whatever.
with a little bit of a backstory.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever you chose in your backstory and character creation. But you're essentially the game starts and you're on a prison transport. You're bound for a Harkonnen slave camp, where you're helping them to rebuild the city of Carthage, which was destroyed during the war. And that's kind of how it starts. And then your transport is shot down, and that's kind of the inciting incident of the game.
That's cool. That's really awesome. Chat, what other questions do you have? Because for me, I've gone through like every piece of this that I had been wondering about that I hadn't seen anything. And I've intentionally stayed away from like kind of hype trailer videos and things like that because it was like I want to find out when it's closer because I know how much these types of things change. But you guys seem like you have quite a lot of things solidified at this point, at least general ideas for how you want it to play, which I think is quite cool.
Yeah, I mean, we're not that far away from hopefully a launch, right? Our early 2025 is when we said we'd launch. Now, what early 2025 means is always a question, but at least from our end, like I think the game's reaching that phase of stabilization and polish that it should be in at this at this point. And then it's the phase where I have to pay a lot of attention because I have this I'm a bit anti-polish in the sense that like I feel like some games streamline everything too much, and the game loses some of its grit. And grit is what I think players like to have just enough grit. So I'm sort of keeping a close eye on it, but we're not a million miles away from being ready, I think.
That's good. Somebody's actually asking about crossplay. Is this something that's going to be PC only? Is it going to be on consoles? Are you going to be able to play between those? What are the options here?
Yeah, so we'll launch on PC. We'll launch on Steam on PC, and then we'll probably do console or release on consoles sometime after that. It hasn't been the priority to get the consoles up to parity with the PC yet. PC will be our launch target, and then we'll move to consoles. So it will happen. As for crossplay, that'll kind of be the discussion that happens when we start talking with the platform owners about console stuff. Usually that's when that discussion happens.
Oh, I have kind of a personal question. Worm riding when?
I'm thinking, I hope before console launch, but worm riding is planned to be something that comes post-launch. Part of the reason for that is just because when we started on this game, Legendary actually didn't want us to show anything Fremen because they were saving the Fremen for the second movie, and they told us like, hey, we don't want you to determine what the Fremen look like for the new universe, which it's fair enough. As the IP holder, they kind of didn't want us, so we kind of put off doing a lot of Fremen stuff until we could see what they had done for the second movie. And at that point, we were quite far in development, so it was like, we're not going to do a ton of Fremen stuff at launch. We're going to do a big Fremen expansion kind of patch at some point. Cool. So that's kind of where we're coming. Yeah.
Oh, that's freaking rad. No, because like worm riding is just such an insane thing, and it's like I can't wait to learn worm riding and then just die 100 times trying to do it the first time, because like I feel like that's how it's gonna go, you know?
Yep.
Because it can't be like any other game where it's like I press a button and I summon my mount. It's like, no, you gotta catch a worm, dude. Like,
yeah,
that's not.
It's got to be, and that's the other side of it, right? As a game mechanic, it needs to be just. It isn't just like the worm riding. Just the getting on needs to be appropriate, but it's also the what do you do once you're on a worm in the game needs to be appropriate, right? Like what activity are we giving you to do on a worm that like you can't do with an ornithopter and you can't do on like a fast moving vehicle. That to me is kind of the heart of this. Like we need to have a really good reason for this to exist for you as a player, and we will have that, but we need some time to think about it and make sure it's all mechanically cohesive as well.
I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. I just run it directly into your base.
Exactly. That's what I think people will try to do. Yeah, exactly.
Immediately just like there we go, right into your base. Gone. That's worm riding. Yeah, it's hilarious.
Yep.
I'm also interested. So like you've got that kind of PvE related content, the PvP related content. What do you feel is the end game? Right, like when you have everything unlocked, when you're trying to do this stuff, is it the political aspect of this, of trying to kind of position that? Is it ownership of a certain part of the greater desert, like the large desert area? Is it is there like a very large end game raid with very difficult enemies? Like what is that?
The answer is that like the Landsrad system is an activity driver for end game. Mm-hmm. So it will be this faction competition, which I consider I don't consider it the end game. I consider it the driver, which tells people these are the activities that exist to do an end game. For example, in the deep desert, we have territory control points. We recently added them to the beta. There are territory control points that give you points in the Landsrad. So if you're, let's say, let's say you've chosen to work for House Atreides. I'll sort of run this through like a player journey, right? You work for player. Your guild is aligned with House Atreides. The Coriolis storm just happened. The deep desert has been wiped. You go and talk to the representative from House Argasats. And House Argasats are like, look, man, we're happy to give you our vote in the Landsrad, but we need you to do this thing for us. What's the thing? Go out to the deep desert. There's an area out there that we want. It's full of particular resources that we're interested in. Go claim that area for us. If you claim that area for us, we'll give you our vote in the Landsrad on Sunday night. Okay. So you go out there as a player, you find the spot, you might want to build a base nearby, and you start earning points by, classic territory control. You take the spot and you stay there. Right? And over time, points begin to accumulate. Thing is, that same guy told the Harkonnen exactly the same thing he told you. So now the Harkonnen are coming to try and claim that spot. Let's say that those spots change every week because the deep desert changes every week. Territory control in the deep desert is different. So for that week, you might be in territory control. But then the next week, you go talk to the same guy, House Argasats, and he's like, look, this week, I just need your guild to give me 5 ornithopters. If we get 5 ornithopters, we'll give you our vote in the Landsrad. Right? Or your faction crafts us 50 ornithopters, and you'll have our vote in the Landsrad. Or there are 10 ecolabs, or 10, I call them Imperial Testing Stations. Ecolabs is the internal shorthand for that. There are 10 ecolabs. I need you to go run those 10 ecolabs and bring me back manifests from each of them, and that'll win your faction of the week. So I see Endgame as this thing where we continue to add activities, and the Landsrad is kind of the menu that tells you which activities are available. And it's also a competition. And PvP, I've said this before, like PvP isn't always stab someone in the throat with a knife. PvP is players competing with other players. And if you're a PvEer who loves to craft, you can participate in PvP in this game. You can beat the Harkonnen faction by crafting for the Atreides. Or if you're if you prefer to just like be a cartographer, and I know this will be an activity in the Landsrad. We don't have it in the beta yet, but it will be. It'll be like, deliver us, like one of the houses will ask you to deliver a certain number of like maps of the deep desert. We need sectors H, G, F, and Z of the deep desert mapped and brought to us and delivered to us, and we will give you our vote in the Landsrad. And so, okay, I love to explore. I'm a cartographer. Off I go. I have something to do this week. I have an activity that's driven by the Landsrad. So the Landsrad, in a way, it's the end game, but it's not the... I think people think that it needs to be the end game in and of itself, but for me, what it is a menu of options for people to go and do activities. And then as we continue to update the game post-launch, we'll just keep adding activities. Like I have a full list of things that I want to add, like a huge list of features that we want to put into the game post-launch, and all of them can just be hooked into the Landsrad and become a part of that weekly cycle of activity for everybody.
I really like that because it's one of the things is we always have an end game. And everyone's like, oh, the end game, I beat all the things in the end game. But if you have a rotating of what is the most optimal end game for the week, like, yeah, that's going to be like, hey, we have a different objective. We have a different objective. And if it's every week that changes, I could see that being highly compelling. Especially if it's this week is a crafter week. This week is a PvP week. This week is a, dungeon week, cartographer week, whatever it's going to be. And is that just one of the votes that you can fight over? Are there like a number of votes you can fight over or just one?
Yeah. Guy? Actually, the Landsrad is heavily inspired by a thing that happened with streamers. Actually, it's kind of funny. I don't know if you've heard of bingo brawlers.
No, I don't know about.
Okay, so bingo brawlers is this super. It's kind of this niche thing, but it happened where Elden Ring players were and some of the top Elden Ring streamers, they basically set up this pool, and they have a bingo board. Right, and you'll have 2 streamers competing with each other. They'll be playing, each one will be playing, and they'll have a bingo board that shows up. And there's a series of 25 objectives on this bingo board. And as they play, like the first one to say kill the first boss in Elden Ring, that bingo card will flip and show whoever won. And the person who lost goes, oh, he took that boss. Oh, he's doing this strategy. I'm going to go over here and try to block him. Right, and so to win the bingo brawlers thing, they basically have it's bingo. You scratch off the board. You get like the most squares, or you win a row, right? And that's kind of and then they have entire seasons based around this. And when I was looking for inspiration, thinking about the Landsrat, I was also thinking about how do you get people to PvP, play against each other, to compete faction versus faction in a way, but not have them have to like actually, just go out with tanks and shoot each other, which can be part of it and can be fun. But also, like, how do we get this to happen, right? And I was watching Bingo Brawlers, and it just clicked with me one day. This is an actually really elegant design for how we can drive activities, PvE activities, PvP activities. They can all be contained within the system. And you're fighting for your faction. I'm fighting for the Atreides. I'm fighting for the Harkonnen. I'm filling in. I'm earning votes by doing activities. And these activities will eventually either win me the week, lose me the week, right? And I don't know. It was totally inspired by Bingo Brawlers. I wear that inspiration openly, but I think it can work as a general video game feature, right? Like as an activity driver in a video game. There was something so compelling about the way they took Elden Ring and turned it into this PvP match, and neither of them were in the same world, and neither of them were fighting each other. So,
Yeah, and I love the idea of having those just be like, hey, they got it first. They get my vote. You're gonna have to come back later, right? That's a cool
Yes.
thing because it means that your faction not only has to do the thing, but you have to do it first, and you have to do it efficiently, and you have to really like work together, And I think that's kind of a very fun thing.
and you have to be super strategic because you see the Harkonnen took 3 squares, and if they get 5, they win for the
Yeah.
week. They block. So you're like, okay, as an Atreides, these guys have taken 3 of the 5 squares. I don't care that we're working on these other 4 squares down here. We have to drop everything and take that square, or it's over.
Yeah.
Right? And that is, I think, the spirit of I also think back to just some of the big community events. Like, I mean, you said you played the Secret World, but some of the stuff where it's just like everybody deliver these resources to open these gates.
Yep.
To make this
Love
happen,
that.
right? Those server-wide events that happen in MMOs that are just fantastic, and there's hundreds of people, working together to do something. And I was a part of this is also thinking about like how can we get hundreds of people across these different servers working together to achieve something. And the Landsrat is the answer. But the Landsrat, as I say, it's kind of the driver of activities that people do. It shouldn't be the thing that everyone is, only concerned about, but it should be like giving them pointers about what can be done. And yes, you can contribute to this as a guild right now. It's like guilds. It's a guild aligned to a faction that can compete. So you can't really do anything solo. You have to join a guild, but you can create a solo guild and compete if you want to be part of it, for sure.
And even then, if you made a solo guild, you could be like a trader. You can go and do exploration. You can do all this kind of stuff as well, and still be part of the big, like all of the voting and all the political intrigue, which is kind of cool. I think that's actually quite neat. Yep. I'm interested though, is with everything being so faction based, how are you guys going to address faction imbalance? What if everybody goes Harkonnen? Because I'm gonna.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's kind of the opposite in beta right now. Everyone's Atreides, so feel free to bring as many people as you like, Thor, and have them be Harkonnen. I need more Harks.
It's time.
But my goal here is, well, the thing is, it's a bit of a spoiler if I talk about the third faction too much. But the third faction will be considered something of a balancing faction, and mechanically, I would say that the way I see this is if it works the way, again, it's like I find these endgame systems so fascinating because they're so hard to test without scale, right? You really need players there to break it so that no game escapes first contact with the player. That's kind of it's kind of the joke, right? Like we will see what happens when I'm sure people are going to find ways to subvert and change. I know people already on the beta have figured out that if they stockpile instead of contributing to the Landsrad, they can do it all in the next week and quickly take the Landsrad, right? So we need to figure out mechanics around this. There's always flaws with every design. But yeah, if there's a third faction, I will leave you with this. I won't say too much, but if there's a third faction, imagine that faction only gets rewarded if the Landsrad ends very close. Let's say there's 25 squares in the let's say there's 25 squares in the Landsrad, and it only ends if there's 12 for Harkonnen and 13 for Atreides, or vice versa. The third faction only gets rewarded if it feels balanced, and that faction has the ability to flip any square.
So
on the
what
board.
you've just told me is that you're finally giving chat the ability to 50-50 and rewarding them for that? That's terrible. That's a nightmarish scenario. I think it's hilarious, dude. No, I'm into that. I think that's actually really cool because now you're dealing with not only the NPC style political intrigue, but you're dealing with player political intrigue too. Where it's like, hey, you want us to win for you? What's in it for us? You're gonna have to give me
100%.
something. Because otherwise, we're just going to make it 50-50, and you get nothing, and we get it all, right? Like, that's a very cool system. I like that. I really like that.
So that's the thought, at least. I mean, again, this isn't 100% in the beta right now, the third faction, and I don't know if I'm going to make it for launch, if we're going to get there in time, which means they might come right after launch. But either way, they will have there is a purpose in the world for this. And yeah, it has been thought about how to do balancing of these kind of systems.
Yeah, because one of the things is players will always find a way to game your system. No matter what, they'll find a way to game it. That's what they do. That's what we're goblins. You know, that's how it works. But like, if you have a balancing factor that is another player, there's no way to solve for that. And that ends up making it very difficult. No matter how much stockpiling you do, they could undo you. And I think that's very interesting. I think it's quite cool because they can't game that system anymore.
Fingers crossed. That's the plan, at least. That's the hope.
Yeah, no, I'm interested in seeing how that works because I don't think that's been done that way before. It's kind of cool.
Yep.
All right, Chet, do you guys have anything else? Any other questions? Oh, ornithopters. Can you have dogfights in the ornithopters?
Yeah,
all right.
You can. The rockets are expensive, so you have to be like people complain on the beta. It's like I took my 50 rockets and I shot at another ornithopter and I missed 49 times. But you can fight, and there's las guns and rockets that you can fire from ornithopters. And yes, people do dogfight. We had one called the Rumble in the Desert. There was like 20 ornithopters fighting each other. It was quite cool to watch.
Sick. Will you guys be able to have it run on Steam Deck? I know how difficult it is to get on that in the beginning, but if there's console in the future, Steam Deck I have found is just phenomenal to work with. So I'd be interested in if any testing has been done around that or any plans for it.
So I have an ROG Ally, which is slightly more powerful, I think, but it's not. A little bit. It's not outside of the realm, and it's fine. I can play it on low with settings turned down, and we haven't even finished optimization for launch, and I can still play it. So I think it's going to be okay on Steam Deck, probably.
That's good.
The game definitely works fine with the controllers and so forth. So
that's great. Do you have any type of min specs, or is that already on the Steam page? Actually, I haven't checked.
I don't. I mean, we have an internal min spec. I don't know if we have a min spec on the Steam page yet.
I don't know if
we'll definitely release that stuff.
Good.
Yeah, there's plans around allowing people to do benchmarks and things and check if their system's ready for the game. So we will have more information on that coming soon. If it's not there already.
It's all set to be announced. So nothing yet.
Yep.
Just a 64-bit system. That's it.
Yep. No, I play it on a 3070 at home just to give some sort of angle. I have a 3070 and it runs fine. I have a 4070 at work and it runs much better. So it goes from like it's like I get 70 FPS at home. I get 100 plus on my 4070.
Nice.
And that's an ultra, so it's fine.
And that's before your guys' performance passes anyway. So like
we're not fully optimized yet as well, right? So yeah, there's more to come for sure.
That's awesome. Can you hunt the worms? I'm gonna guess no. A worm is a terrifying thing, but yeah, no.
I mean, they're like the one consistent thing that you don't want to mess with in the game, right? Like they're so sorry. We talked earlier about what happens when you die. I didn't mention this. You lose everything if a worm eats you. Everything.
Oh.
Everything.
Oh.
That is the one thing that you need to be scared of constantly. If you get eaten by a worm, you wake up naked. You have nothing. Right? Like that is the one consistent rule throughout the game. So you do not want to tempt the worm. Like it's really like when I died of the worm, it's always because I'm like, oh, a shipwreck fell from the sky. I'm going to quickly loot it. And that worms come to eat those shipwrecks because they make big vibrations when they crash. So like I run out to the shipwreck and I start harvesting metal off it and I open a little hatch on the side and I take loot out and then I'm like, oh, there's time to do the hatch on the other side. And then I hear the worm coming and I'm like, oh, I'll make it back to land and I don't. They get me. And it's always because I tempt my luck, right? It's because, and I should know better. I'm making the damn game, and I still think to myself, it'll be all right, and it's never okay. And then you wake up with nothing, and it's kind of like, oh, okay, well, I mean, at least I left spares in my base.
So anytime you feel like, I could totally make it, you can't. It's a word.
You really can't.
With that in mind, can we use stuff like thumpers? Like, do those exist? Will they exist?
Yep.
Yeah,
it's actually a really important part of the strategy for later on as well. Like when you want to harvest a big spice field, you want to have someone placing out. Like you probably want a team, right? Like this. You asked me about raids. I didn't really go into it, but like harvesting a big spice field is like a raid.
Yeah.
Because you need a few people coordinated. You need someone flying a transport ornithopter carrying a spice crawler underneath it, right? And that is a mechanic. You can actually fly down in transport ornithopters and pick up vehicles and carry them beneath the vehicle. So you fly out to these big spice fields. You probably want to have at least 1 or 2 people acting as spotters, just like in the movie, right? Keeping an eye out for worm sign. You probably want someone on a bike placing out thumpers that keep the worm away from the spice field that you're trying to target, because your activity on the surface there is going to create vibration. And it's a threat game. It's like I talked about, right? It's like you want to keep the boss, the sandworm, from gaining threat on the sand crawler, which is harvesting the spice, for as long as possible. So you're using all these high threat elements like thumpers to draw it away. And it will eat those thumpers one by one, and then it will turn and come for you. But at some point, your threat will pass the threat that's generated by a new thumper being placed out. And at that point, it's going to come anyway. And that's kind of what these mechanics, these kind of, that's the confluence of these sort of sandboxy mechanics, right? They all come together to create this moment where it's like, oh shit, get the crawler up, because the worm is coming, right? And then it will eat the field.
So. Oh, wow. No, that's awesome. Yeah, no, I'm super into that. Oh, yeah, no, chat keeps asking about the lasgun shield atomic effect, which is, I think, is when you shoot a Holtzman shield with a lasgun, it just explodes. It's just death.
Causes a nuclear explosion. Yeah, so we actually changed the law here. I'm sorry, everybody, but I felt like I had to do it for good gameplay. I asked Legendary for permission to just have the... So what we have in our story, like we did try to build it into the game backstory. We didn't change the law exactly. We say that Carthag, the city of Carthag, which was a Harkonnen capital on the planet, there was a shield lasgun interaction that happened in that city, which caused a nuke and blew up basically the city and destroyed, this huge city. And that's what the Harkonnens are rebuilding on the planet. And because of that incident, the Emperor declared that there will be no lasguns imported to Arrakis that didn't have a safety mechanism. So now if you point a lasgun at someone with a shield, it just switches off. You can't use it. It just says nope. Right? And we did that. I know it's a bit sad, but we did that because we're like, is it really fun for everyone to be nuking each other? Like, it's fun once. I'm not sure it's fun a lot. So.
Yeah. To be honest with you, though, I think it's cool that you guys understood that was part of the lore and then added that to the game in a way that was kind of lore accurate and compelling with that in a way that makes the gameplay more fun. Because to be honest with you guys, otherwise I'd just be going around nuking everything. You would be going around nuking everything, and that doesn't lead to a game, right? It's not gameplay at that point. It's just nukes, right?
That's mayhem. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, I think Fallout 76 had nukes, right? And we saw that happen. People were...
Yeah, just nuke everything.
Exactly.
Oh, man. And that would be dramatically easier to pull off with this than going and getting nuke codes in Fallout every time, because you had to go get the nuke codes. Is this the Dune MMO? Yeah. He already said, yes, you can do spice, and that's part of it. And we'll see how that works, how it feels. Seriously, respect. Yeah, no, I think this is... I'm even more interested in this, especially because you guys' background in Secret World, like the systems that you've talked about, and not only that, the intentionality of how you've designed these systems, the way that you feel about them, the reasons that you've gone down in order to determine the system's going to be this way. It's just great. So I'm very excited for this, man.
Fingers crossed that it all works out when players get into it. And
Chat wants to know if there's going to be like voice in the game, any type of systems like that'll work that way, or voice over internet protocol, or maybe I guess proximity voice, anything like that.
Yeah, so there's proximity voice. So you hold down V, you talk, everyone around you can hear. We have text chat, we have map chat. map-wide chat, so you can talk to everyone on your particular server area. And then in addition, we're doing classic WoW is a game that I have a huge amount of respect for, just the number of things they got right. And one of the things that I think I was playing Dune, and I was like, it's a little bit, it doesn't feel as social as it should. And one of the things, and for some reason, I can't remember why, but I was playing WoW Classic as well. I went back and I was playing Season of Discovery maybe 6 months ago. I was like, you know what I miss that WoW has that like we aren't doing in Dune? And people kind of rolled their eyes at me and went, "Oh, you stupid creative director playing another game and stealing the idea again." But like the chat bubbles in WoW, just when you run past someone and they give you a heal or they give you a buff and you just say, TY, just that level of communication, just those chat bubbles. So we're gonna have some level of chat bubble in the game as well, just so that you can get that sort of instant communication without having to use your voice if you don't want to. And I don't know, for me that always felt like it's such a nice thing. You get it, you get on a lift in WoW and someone says hi and just talk a little bit in proximity chat bubble, right? You don't need to do much. And I know role players like it too, so I'm a big fan of that. So
no, I've been playing a lot of World of Warcraft Classic lately with our guild, Only Fangs. Great game. Great guild name. It's run by Soda Poppet, but we have a proximity voice guild add-on that only lets it happen with our guildies, and all of the guildies are streamers. So it ends up being really compelling for that, because we know that someone's not going to jump up and say some Xbox, Xbox Live ridiculous bullshit into your stream, right? So I'm always into things like that where we can go and interact with other players in some way that is compelling, lead to kind of role play scenarios or things like that, and also do it in a way that's not just going to, lead to toxicity, other garbage in there. So I think that's quite cool. Yeah, super into that.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, I have another thing in about 20 minutes. So is there anything you want to tell chat before we go?
No. Thanks everyone for listening to me ramble on about Dune Awakening. It's also been really nice to meet you, Thor. It's
nice to meet you.
There's a lot of people around the office here, big fans. So I was like, you know what? I really want to talk to your dad because I need a cinematics director.
You should.
Yeah.
He streams now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he started streaming it. It's Year Joy, like Joey Ray, because that's his name. So then it's that with an anagram. Yeah.
Nice. But yeah, so thanks everyone for listening, and hopefully we'll all see you. You can sign up for the beta on tuneawakening.com. All the usual selling you in on the game stuff. But just if you want to come help with the beta and give feedback, where it's a really cool community. The people there are great. I really love the sort of environment that we're building around the game. I think that's one of the most important things, getting a solid community of people who are just, they're big Dune fans and they're also big gamers, and it's kind of having those people together. So if you want to be part of something before it goes sort of nuclear and we let the masses in, I go sign up, and hopefully if you can help us test and find bugs, and otherwise, we'll see you in a few months.
So that means you'll get me into the beta, right?
Yeah, 100%.
That I signed up on.
You got a man on the inside now.
No,
you got a man on the inside now. You're good.
I signed up for the beta, I think 9 months ago. Signed up for it.
Yeah, well,
so I'm in.
I think the community team have they're a little concerned about letting too many streamers in at once, probably. But we'll see.
If you guys have
something out.
If you guys have an embargo or things on it like that, like one of the things I've been doing lately is playing Ashes of Creation, as you were talking about earlier. It's just like the biggest thing that I will always push is bug report. Bug report absolutely everything. Have fun with it. Find bugs that are in the game. Find exploits in the game. Turn them in, because it makes the game better for everybody. So anybody who is out there doing beta testing, anyone that's doing that kind of stuff, report everything you find. Even if it's like, hey, I don't know if this is a bug. It feels weird. That's just let them know, because it makes the game better for everybody. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you as well.